kick off with the overall market performance. We're up 0.4% today. We had a really strong day yesterday. 9.06 billion rand passing through the market. Did you expect such high volumes today?
No, I thought, basically it felt so dead out there. Everybody had left. Certainly for the afternoon, I was shocked when I saw there would be 9 billion. I mean, the current run rate is about 12 or 13 billion rands worth of turnover. So somebody somewhere must have been trading something or doing something or trading baskets. But I know I must be, forgiven here for being a little bit smug, because the beginning of the week, the world was ending, right? The beginning of the sovereign debt downgrade, America's finished, end of the empire, all that BS. And now here we are at the end of the week. We're ending on highs since June 2008. I had the sense in the middle of the week that there were those that had kind of written a lot of downside protection baskets who are taking those off. And that means that in the institutional environment, people are net buyers of the index in scale.
Well, wouldn't you say that one of the reasons that the markets are still doing very well, that we have these very down days when the world is almost about to end because of all the bad news, is because we have so much excess liquidity. So it's got to find a home in some place. So it'll either go into the currency, the bond markets, clearly in some asset class. Could that also be one of the reasons?
I'm not sure what that means, that excess liquidity argument, because, there is a lot of money sloshing around as in the nature.
Do you understand liquidity crunch? The opposite of that.
No, what it is, it's like people have savings and others have investments, and you have instruments, securities, whether they're equities or treasuries, which people, or corporate credits, which people park money in, and it all sloshes around in the great big game of finance. So at any given moment, people are liking the one asset class or the other, but for me, that's just like, score counting. What's important is asset values. In other words, what are people prepared to pay to own a 10-year US Treasury? What are people prepared to pay to own a share of BHP Billiton, blah, blah, blah. And for me anyway, as the world revolves and rotates and crises are overcome and, natural disasters are faced down, that number looks to me like it's rising. Asset prices have been rising for the last 2 years. So, I think it's all very well to talk about, where we're going next, but you've got to react and recognize that, the last 2 years have been very good to be in markets and disastrous if you've been out.
Let's touch on Anglo American. 37% drop in the first quarter coal output. Again, it's pretty much the same story with what we saw with BHP Billiton, which came out with quarterly production numbers yesterday. Copper also hit quite extensively. So we're really seeing this Australian crisis that did play out impacting production, and I suppose to the benefit of the overall commodity price, because we could see a deficit within those spaces.
So we've had Southern Hemisphere excessive rain and flooding. So you're the environmental expert. Is this a one-off occurrence? Or is this like the beginning of...
What if I tell you if it's the beginning of a lot more to come? What would you say? You tell me.
Well, I'd like to see the science on that, because I'd like to understand, people often think, floods, because we had floods in Western Australia, or was it Eastern Australia? Eastern Australia. We had floods in Chile, of all places. We're having, excessive rain in our country. Kumba Iron Ore was also saying that they'd had problems getting iron ore out of the pit fast enough. I think weather patterns, people always experience the one that they're in as like the worst that's ever happened. But if you look back at historical and news-related sites, it suggests that these things happen all the time.
Well, it's peculiar that we're getting rain in the middle of April in Johannesburg,
no, it's not.
Which is, yes, it is very peculiar.
It's not.
In my 28 years, it's very peculiar.
Go and have a look at the average rainfall for Johannesburg for March, and you'll find that it rains in March. So it's not unusual.
In April?
Oh, April too. Damn, is this April?
Yes, it is April, unfortunately for you.
No, honestly, so for Anglo, the production challenge that you look for in these quarterly numbers is like, what broke down? Where did the ore loader come shredded? Where did the train driver drive into the crossing? What rain problems did they have? What experiences did they have with the ore body and all that sort of rubbish? It swings and roundabouts. Sometimes you'll have record numbers, sometimes you won't.
Let's touch on Kumba Iron Ore, reporting a 23% decline in quarterly production. Obviously, a part of the stable of the Anglo American stable, again, because of rainfall. Let's not even touch on the environmental weather pattern issue. Yes. Kumba Iron Ore, Anglo Platinum, Anglo American. We were chatting, I know that I've spoken to you about this before, and you've said that if you're brave enough and you want to have exposure to a company such as Kumba Iron Ore, you're actually exposing yourself to the iron ore space. A diversified miner such as Anglo American is a far safer bet. Would you still go on that premise?
Yeah, you know, commodity companies that make one physical commodity that is traded in global markets. Remember, iron ore used not to be, but is now, you know, quoted on a daily basis. And they produce it in a particular country environment like Kumba does, South Africa. What you can do is on any given day, you can look at what the price of iron ore is and you can look at where the rand-dollar exchange rate is trading. And you can work out just about, you know, what their profits are for the day, provided you've got some kind of model about their production output. So all I'm saying here is that guarantees you a rocky ride, because every other monkey out there that's trading the market's looking at the same data. So, you know, it's going to go up and down. If that's going to trouble you, well, then don't buy the share. If you compare that to most industrial companies, you've got no idea from one period to the next. You know, like from one 6-month report to the next, because you've got no idea how many.
Kumba iron ore at 469 Rand, down 0.6% today. A buy for you.
What's the price now?
469.
Anything under 500 is a steal.
Okay, fantastic. So I assume Anglo American, which was up only 1.4%. I mean, obviously after that,
I'm a bit more anxious about Anglo.
R50.
Bit more anxious about Anglo because that massive iron ore project in Brazil is going to be a company maker or killer, because it's such an enormous capex spend, and it's a big technical challenge in terms of the rebriquetting of the ore at the port.
I see. And with regards to Anglo Platinum, you said anything below 500, the stock at 679 Rand a share. We've got Implats, which was up almost 2% today, ending at 198 Rand and 52 cents. And I know that that is your preferred play within the platinum space.
Yes, and I do like the platinum stocks.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm such an environmental enthusiast, I like the. How are you looking at me?
I thought you're a valuations enthusiast, but nevertheless, please
continue.
No,
I'm a huge environmental enthusiast in the sense that I think environmental regulations are going to get a lot tighter.
Yes.
So the motor vehicle industry, which is going to be with us in its petroleum form for another couple of decades, is desperate for the platinum, for the auto catalyst. So I'm very positive about, but I, as you say, am more positive about Impala than Anglo Plats. Anglo Plats, for one reason or another, as big a company as it is, has always been a sort of a serial underperformer.
Let's now delve into US earnings and shift gears so you can start getting your mad hat on for the Mad Market section. Not that you, yes, I know, I was actually laughing at you. General Electric doing quite well. Apple also doing quite well. We've
what
had
a surprise.
Some really good numbers. Morgan Stanley, yes, absolutely big surprise that Apple did well. Morgan Stanley, drop in profit, but results beat expectations overall.
Okay, so first of all, these big global multinationals like Apple, you know the business model, designed in California, manufactured by Foxconn in China, sold all over the world, can't make enough iPads, can't make enough iPhones. Earnings, traditionally, they guide very conservatively and then they beat the skin off it. Even all of the professional analysts totally blown away by those numbers. But the share price has risen by such a lot in the last 2.5 years, I guess. People are kind of like exhausted by this thing, and it's sitting at around $350. It's one of the most valuable companies in the world. The question you've got to be asking yourself if you want to buy that stock is how many more of these things can they sell? In other words, we all know, you know, our friends and families, and we know what phones they've got. Everybody knows the iPhone is the best phone to have, and the iPad is the most wow, sham wow, you know, home device, blah, blah.
How many more wow devices could they come up with going forward?
Well, they're coming with a big TV. The TV thing is apparently, they've had a couple of experiments to try and do an Apple TV, not very successfully. But my sense is that a fraction of the people that could have iPhones have currently got iPhones. So I think there's enormous potential there. I think it's a strong buy at these levels. GE is a much more complex business model, you know, power stations, aircraft engines, wind turbines. The finance business is making money again, and I think that's what's driving a more positive sentiment. I think it should be trading far higher than $20 a share, but, you know, let's see.
And I found a little bit of bad news for you. The Philly Fed index coming in much lower than most had expected at 18.5, down from 36.9.
What's that Philly Fed? Is that like, you know, a horse racing indication? What is that?
No, it's a manufacturing indicator. Oh, you don't know? Sorry, I thought you didn't know. I thought you didn't look at all the bad news.
No, it's fair enough. So all these positive earnings came through in the pre-market, and then like after we were up like half an hour into the day, then this ridiculous Philly Fed thing comes.
You can't even say it.
And so the market has gone back to flat. I don't know whether the Dow's in the green now.
It's a good leading indicator for the second quarter reading, GDP reading, and this is why it is quite important.
Yeah, well, I think the people of Philadelphia should man up and like get with their economy and, you know, try harder.
On a different note, Johannesburg might be in a different scenario going forward.
Happy
in a better
days.
scenario,
Well,
with less rats, we
apparently
hope.
the Pick It Up strike, for those of you who are watching this from outside of Joburg, I'm sure you couldn't care, but, you know, the large rats that have been running the city, apparently now, you know, they must go home, and the Pick It Up guys are on the streets busy collecting the rubbish. Hallelujah.